in our series, and we started last week on this concept of living with limitation, that God created us in His image and after His likeness, but not with His limitlessness. And that we bump into our limitations, and that we struggle with limitations, and that what you believe about God and what you believe about yourself when you experience limitations will set you on a course, will shape your life in specific ways. And today we're going to talk about one of those limitations. It is the limitation of depression and mental health, and living on this side of the kingdom coming, on this side of God restoring all things to Himself. And how do I live with a soul that at times feels heavy, at times doesn't feel well? How do I get to Jesus in the midst of those? And so I want to tell you just a story. I want to introduce you to a family. About 40 years ago, a church was planted by, we'll just call him Pastor Dave. Pastor Dave planted a church called Inland Community Church. It's in California, Inland Hills Community Church. And he had all of the hopes and dreams that I would have for you. Wanted to see people saved, wanted to see people set free, wanted to see the church multiplied and disciples sent out. And he experienced that, experienced God's grace, experienced the planting and the watering, and God providing the fruit. And for about 35 years, it was well, and the church was growing, and by every measure successful. And then he went to the doctor and got some news that would have ended up on our board. He was told that you have leukemia, and you're probably going to not live through that leukemia. And so for about 5 years, he did what many of you are doing. He is trying to walk with God through the valley. He's trying to seek God. He's trying to have hope. He's trying to take God at His word. But in the fall of 2015, he went home to be with Jesus. And he stood before Jesus, and I imagine that he heard, "Well done, good and faithful servant." The church, obviously grieving, having a difficult time with its founding pastor, having lost his battle to leukemia, didn't have to look far for its next pastor. They hired his son, Pastor Drew. Pastor Drew had been a part of that church his entire life, loved that church, was gifted, had all of the measurables that you would want for a lead pastor. And so he took over the church, and the church grew even more under Pastor Drew. And the church experienced grace and fruit and faithfulness of the ministry of Pastor Drew. And everything looked good on the outside, but Pastor Drew didn't really stop to grieve his father's passing. He didn't really give himself time. You know, there's a lot to do and a lot of ministry to happen. And so he just picked up what his father had left off, and he started to serve the church. And for a few years, everything is up and to the right, but then he started to have some trouble. And he goes to the doctor, and the doctor says that you have a hyperactive thyroid, and it creates this sense of always feeling tired and always feeling a little melancholy. And so there's some therapy and there's some meds, and you should be right as rain and no time at all, but it didn't happen. He's taking the meds and goes back to the doctor, and they're doing all these tests, and they can't figure out why Pastor Drew is struggling. Pastor Drew's feeling tired. Goes back to another doc, and the doc says, "It's not your thyroid, it's your soul. You're depressed. You're clinically depressed." And so the church asked Pastor Drew to take a sabbatical, and he's meeting with his mentors, and he's going to his counselors, and everything seems well, and he's in pursuit of redemption, and he's believing the right things, and he's doing all of the things that we would think that he should be doing. But on October 26th of 2018, Pastor Drew made a decision that changed his family's life. He took his own life. And he left a wife and a growing church and 3 boys. Beautiful little boys, beautiful wife. The reason I tell you that story is because I want to personalize this concept for you. And I want you to understand that Pastor Drew believed the Bible and had good theology and trusted God and still took his own life. That these issues that we're talking about, they don't discriminate. People who are in pursuit of God and in pursuit of good belief still have a difficult time with this. This is a personal topic for me. In the last 2 generations on a side of my family, not 1, but 2 suicides that I didn't know existed until I was in my 20s. It was kind of the family secret. And so I know what it is like to be shaped by this type of tragedy. I know what it is like to be shaped by this type of struggle. This is an important topic for many reasons and for many people. At the same time, it's overwhelming, isn't it? And it's scary and it's complicated, and for that reason, it's easier for most of us to just ignore it and not talk about it. But I don't think that that's pleasing to God. I think that it's important for us to talk about valleys, and it's important for us to talk about issues that we struggle with. And so I need to ask for your grace today. I have a lot that I want to say, a lot that's on my heart. If I am honest with you, I feel heavy and a bit more worried. I'm not the worrying type, especially around preaching, but my heart is to help you. And because of that, for those of you who don't experience this, I want to teach you. And for those of you who do experience this, I want to talk to you. And there might be some confusion around which is happening. And so I just need you to ask God's Holy Spirit to give you grace to hear and me grace to say, and to meet us in the midst of the imperfection of preaching for His purposes and grace on our lives. Can you do that? Let's pray. God, we love you. And I come to you around this topic that... God, I'm not a psychiatrist, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a counselor, I'm a pastor. And I'm glad to be, and I'm grateful for my church. I love them very, very much. I'm honored to be here, God. My heart is to help them, even if imperfectly. And so I call out to you, our perfect God, who loves us madly, who victory belongs to. And I ask you to give me words to say and give us ears to hear and a heart to receive the good news of the gospel around these difficult issues. We love you. We thank you, and we pray these things in the name of Jesus. Amen and amen. I think that the air that we're breathing is polluted. I don't necessarily just mean the oxygen. I'm not talking about global warming or any of those type of issues. I'm talking about our lifestyle. Most of our life are operating around a sedentary practice. We have these books and these apps and these websites that are popping up about stretches and posture and all of these things that are happening in our bodies because we spend a lot of our days indoors without natural light, hunched over a computer looking at blue light. We're one of the most indoor cultures in the history of humanity. We're also one of the most isolated. Even though we have a lot of different ways to connect to one another, we don't connect to one another with any type of depth or meaning. It used to be that the porch was on the front and that you stopped from porch to porch to porch. Now the garage is in the back and you pull in and the garage door goes down and you don't see any of your neighbors. Our diets are, can I say, somewhat lacking. We eat a lot of fast food. Listen, if you've had a lot of Big Macs in your life, just the name alone should concern you. We're sleep deprived. We live at a frenzied pace, especially in the United States, and we've got these tools that were crafted and conceived and sold to us. Our bill of sale says this will help you connect, this will help you be efficient, this will help you find friends a little bit easier, and so we have cell phones and social media and the news comes to us. But have you noticed that the creators of these devices and these platforms are kind of on an apology tour now? And they're saying we wanted it to be this thing and to produce this thing, but it's produced something entirely different. And at the physiological level, our connectedness is reshaping our brains. It's reshaping the way that we think and the way that we process. And we're creating a profoundly self-centered culture. I think that the logo of self-centered culture is this. Right? For basketball, it's Jordan. For self-centeredness, it's a selfie culture that we have. And not just selfie culture, it's selfie with the filter, so I can look as good as possible in the best light, with the best coloring, because I want to put my best successes on social media so you don't know my limitations, you only know my successes. And it is killing us. We are living in a time that we are experiencing the deconstruction of generations and of families, meaning that our friends and our mentors are our peers. You say, what's wrong with that? I want you to just think about if you got your best advice from your 15-year-old self and your knucklehead buddies, where you would be. If the people who gave you the best amount of wisdom and the best amount of truth were the people who are exactly like you, how wise would you be? Listen, you need different generations. You need diversity, but we're living in a time where our connectedness is making us more isolated, because if I don't like what you say or what you believe or what you think, I just unfollow or unfriend you. And so what happens is people who look like me, think like me, talk like me, surround me and provide me my own wisdom back to me, mirror myself back to me at the expense of all of us. We're living in a difficult time. We lack identity. We're struggling with identity. We're struggling with who we are and what truth is. We're struggling with purpose, a reason to get out of bed, a reason to go get something. We lack the ability to process pain at a cataclysmic level. This past week, I spent time in Chichen Itza. It's that famous Mayan temple. And it was fascinating to me to watch the Mayan culture's relationship to death. You can say it was not good and demonic and idolatrous, and might be all of those things, but the thing that they had that we don't is a language and a rhetoric and a belief around the afterlife and about death and around struggles, and we don't have that in America. We don't have a way to process loss and pain and death and tragedy, and so we don't. We just ignore it, or we medicate, or we escape. We Netflix binge. We take meds to go to sleep, and then we take meds to wake up. We take meds to feel high, and then meds to bring us back down. You say, I don't take any meds. Listen, you're taking meds if you're drinking multiple cups of coffee to wake up. I hope that you know that. I hope that you know that. I'm not condemning you. I'm not judging you. I've joined you in many ways, right? Okay? But let's just be honest with one another. Let's be honest with one another that we don't really know how to process pain. We fail to process. We just keep going. We're too busy to stop, like Pastor Drew was, and we're coming apart at the seams in many ways. We live in a country, listen to this, we're working on our third year in a row of our life expectancy going down in the United States. I don't know if you knew that. The first time since 1962 that our country has experienced back-to-back years of our life expectancy going down. Typically, when a culture experiences that, it's because of war or disease or famine. That's not happening in our country. The opposite is happening. You say, well, heart disease and cancer, nope, both of those are going down. The top 3 things that are killing people in our society today that are driving our life expectancy down at the macro level are Alzheimer's, suicide, and accidental death from drug and alcohol use. That's the top 3, and it's happening at an epidemic level and driving the life expectancy of all of us down. Suicide is at a 30-year high and climbing. The suicide rate is twice what the murder rate is and climbing. Suicide is the number 1 killer of kids 15 to 24. A lot of you are sitting on this side of the room. The number 1 killer isn't car accidents, it's suicide, taking our own life. Listen, we are literally dying of despair in this country. Literally dying of despair. And so if that's you, let's just talk for a minute. Listen, I'm not naive enough to think that in a room this size, with the amount of people that have come into this building, that there aren't some of you who happen in here or were dragged here or are here every week and feeling this way, and now we're talking about it, and you are in a season of despair that has been maybe longer than you can even remember where it began. And so if that's you, listen to me, please. Don't leave this room without talking to somebody. Don't leave this building without talking to somebody. Listen, this is the last session that I'm going to give. I'll skip growth track. I'll get somebody else to do it. Just tell them Pastor Tim said to come get him. Talk to me. And if you don't want to talk to me, then talk to one of our pastors. And if you don't want to talk to one of our pastors, please listen to me. I'm going to put a phone number up on the screen. This is the National Suicide Prevention Hotline. Listen, you don't have to be alone in this. You don't have to go through this alone. You don't have to experience this alone. Let somebody else know what's going on in your heart and in your mind. And please don't leave the building with this secret or this struggle going on by yourself. Listen, I wouldn't be a good pastor to you if I didn't ring the bell on the trajectory of our lifestyle. I'm concerned about where we're going. I really am. This isn't like a moral or religious thing. I'm just concerned about how fast our lives are, how isolated our lives are, the things that we're putting our time into. At the same time, there are people in here that you're doing the right things. Your diet's solid, your sleep's solid, your relationships are solid, you're in pursuit of God, you believe the Bible, you memorize verses, you serve, you went to growth track, all of those kind of things, and tomorrow morning you're still going to wake up in the dark. And that's the thing that I want to acknowledge today, that the issue that's happening sometimes is out there. Sometimes the reason that you're struggling is because your lifestyle is garbage. And as you repent of those things, it will create a change internally. I also acknowledge that sometimes everything on the outside is wrong and the problem is still in here. The problem is in here. And how do I address those things? And so let me just give you a clarifier. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a counselor, not a good one. I'm good for one counseling session, okay? But I am a pastor, and I'm happy to be a pastor. There's no job that I would rather have. I'm not a pastor because I couldn't do something else. I'm a pastor because I want to be a pastor, and I'm a pastor at this church because I'm so honored and so glad to be in this city and at this church, and I will be for as long as God allows me and you'll have me. I think that I have the best church in the world, and I say that to you all the time, not because I'm trying to work something up or gin something up. I think I have the best church in the world. You don't have the best pastor in the world. That's just the way that it works. But my heart today, listen, is to help you as best as I know how. And the only way that I know how to truly help you is to not give you concepts, it's to introduce you to a person. And his name is Jesus. Okay? He is the one that we need, and God is not silent on this topic. Not at all. And so let's talk about it. Depression, the definition of depression is it's a mood disorder characterized by anhedonia, which means the inability to experience pleasure. It comes with extreme sadness, poor concentration, sleep problems, loss of appetite, feelings of guilt, helplessness, and hopelessness. When you read that list, I hope that you see that this has either been, is, or certainly could be anyone in this room, on this stage, singing, preaching, serving, believing, anyone in this room. 1 in 5 have been on medication around mental health, and 1 in 9 currently are. So let's just talk. Is it okay for a Christian to be on medication? Come on. Really? Is this a real question? You're going to go to the doctor and take antihistamines. You're going to go to the doctor when you have bronchitis and you're going to take medicine. You're going to go to the doctor for your chest but not for your mind because God is fine with one but not fine with the other. Listen, the God who created the doctor, the God who created the pharmacist, the God who created the materials that create the medicine that serve us for seasons and over time are under the grace, the common grace of God. And so let me just pastor you and let me help you around this. You should have no sense of condemnation, guilt, or shame if you are taking meds for your mental illness or your mental health. What I do want to encourage you to do is to have an entrance and an exit plan. Here's why. Because I don't want you to fundamentally get dependent on medicine. I want you to fundamentally be dependent on the person and work of Jesus. And so the best counsel that I can give you is be free to take medicine, but have a plan to stop and evaluate. Have a plan to take it and then to step out and say, God, what are you doing? What are you saying? But meds in many ways can create some space for you to breathe a little bit, for you to think a little bit, for you to pray a little bit, for you to process a little bit, to calm your mind and your heart and your soul down so that God can speak into the middle of it. And so is it okay for a Christian to take meds? Yes. Is it okay for a Christian to be fundamentally addicted to anything other than Jesus? No. But that's not what we're talking about here today. The thing that makes this so difficult is our, and I just mean the church, Big C's, perspective on mental health. And there's a stigma around it. Let me prove it to you. A couple months ago, I went to Nepal. And I haven't been sick the entire time that I've been at Graceway. I decided to go to Nepal, and the day before I leave, I get sick. And I was sick the entire time that I was in Nepal, and I was actually sick for 6 weeks. I was the sickest I've been in a long period of time. I wasn't sleeping well. I'd come up on the stage and I'd be highly, highly medicated. I can't be held responsible for what I said during that time, right? And I was sneezing and snotting and coughing. And it was interesting because I'd have people come into Guest Central and they would say, man, Pastor, that's crazy, all that spiritual warfare around you going to Nepal. God must be up to something in Nepal. God must be doing something in Nepal. Otherwise, you might not have gotten sick when you were in Nepal. Do you know what nobody came in and said to me? No one came in and said the reason you got sick is because you lack faith. No one said that. No one came in and said if you just believe the Bible better, you wouldn't have been sick, Pastor Tim. No one would have said you had bad theology or maybe you should just memorize some verses and then you wouldn't have gotten sick. Nobody said that, and it would have been bizarre and ridiculous for you to come in and say that the reason that I got somewhere between bronchitis and pneumonia was because I didn't believe the Bible. But this is exactly what we say to people who are sick in their soul and their mind. We say if you just knew the Bible more, you would feel better. If you just took God at His word, you would feel better. If you just memorized some stuff, you would feel better. If you just had better theology, you would feel better. And the fact that you don't means that you must not. Listen, that is not what the Bible teaches. And we need to stop saying it. It's wrong. It's not helpful. At some levels, I think it's sinful. because it puts people in bondage that God says he sent his son to be providing freedom from. And so how do we grapple with the removal of this stigma? How do we grapple with the reality of these issues in our church? In our church, we're in this together. The first thing we need to do is let's reframe Sundays. Let's reframe Sundays. We're in a public setting, right? And you got up today knowing that you were going to come to a public setting, and as far as I can tell, none of you are here in your pajamas. As far as I can tell, most of you took a shower, and we thank you for that, right? As far as I can tell, most of you brushed your teeth. I bumped into a couple people, maybe not, right? But listen, you know that you're coming to a public setting, and to a large degree, church historically has been taught. We even have a phrase for it. I'm going to put on my Sunday best. And it's not just my clothes, it's also my facial expression. It's how I'm carrying myself. And you come into this room, and we got a lot of lights, and we got a lot of this and a lot of that. And Pastor Brandon's on the stage, and he's pumping the air, right? And he's smiling, this great smile, tons of charisma, and everybody else on the stages, and I get up, and I'm, come on, somebody in, and all that kind of thing. And you can start to believe wrongly that nobody up here has issues. You can start to believe wrongly that just because I'm smiling, just because I'm up, just because I'm trying to encourage and breathe life into you, that just because we're singing songs hopefully make you want to move and put fresh air into your sails, that the people on the stage aren't experiencing what you're experiencing. Now listen, we're not going to change that, and I'm not going to apologize for that. I know that you get beat down by the world Monday to Saturday, and I want you to enjoy coming into the house of God, and I want you to be uplifted to the very best of our ability. And so we're going to aim to praise God together gladly. We're going to aim to enjoy God together. But the reality of it is, it doesn't mean that we have it all together. It doesn't mean that my Sunday best represents the reality of my soul. And at the same time, we don't talk about depression. We don't talk about mental health. We don't have a theology for suffering. And so you layer all of those things into the church, and we're basically saying to those of us who are struggling with depression, God loves you, best of luck. And so I want to say something today about Sunday, and I want you to say something about our services. It's very simple, but as the leader of this house, I need you to hear it from me. It's okay to not be okay. You don't have to fake it. I don't want you to fake it. I need you to understand that until you can accept living in transparency, you can't accept the help that's available to you. I need you to understand that if you're new here, you say everybody looks happy and everyone looks up and I feel broken and I feel banged up, I need you to understand that we just made it to the hospital first. That's the only thing that's happened. We're not better than you. We're not smarter than you. We don't love God more than you. We just made it here first. And I say to you all the time, look, I'm not the pastor of this church because I'm the smartest guy in the room. I'm not the pastor of this church because I love God more than anyone. I'm not the pastor of this church because I know the Bible more than anyone. I'm just the pastor of the church playing a role that God created me for. It doesn't make me better than you. It makes me along in the journey with you. And it's okay to not be okay. I want our environment to be a place that we celebrate, because I think God is worthy of celebration. But I also want our environment to be a place of safety, that when I'm on a mountaintop, we celebrate together, but when I'm in a valley, I don't have to act like I'm on a mountaintop. The Bible says very clearly, Jesus says very clearly, come to me, all who labor and are heavy laden, and I'll give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and lowly in heart, and you will find, here it is, rest for your soul. Now here's what I need you to understand. If no matter how much I talk, you reject this in our church, here's what we're setting one another up for. We're requiring one another to create compartments. We're requiring one another to fake it here and live in your true reality here. You're expecting people to hide. You're pushing struggles into shadows, and I need you to understand that shadows is the place that Satan does his best work. And so I'm asking you that Graceway could be a place that it's okay to not be okay, that it's okay to be in process, that it's okay to be struggling, that you can bring it into the light and receive help and hope and community, that you can borrow victory and faith when you need it, and that we can receive everything that God has for us together. I'm asking you, yes, if you want to put on your Sunday best, go nuts. Put on your Sunday best. But don't have lies be underneath of it. You see, we have a struggle with shouldn't in the church. Don't we? We struggle with shouldn't. I shouldn't be doing this. I shouldn't be believing this. I shouldn't be feeling this way. I shouldn't be going through this. This shouldn't be happening. You see, the problem with shouldn't is that shouldn't creates shame. And so we don't talk about it. We put on our Sunday best. We smile to the best of our ability. We're jumping and we're happy and all those kind of things. And we're reinforcing, because we don't ever talk about suffering or have a theology for it, that you shouldn't be going through this. And it creates shame in you, and shame creates secrets. Listen, you're only as free as your secrets. You're only as strong as your secrets. You're only as healthy as your secrets. Shame creates secrets, and secrets promote isolation. Secrets promote isolation. Can I tell you, if you're the only one who knows you're in trouble, you're in more trouble than you think. If you're the only one who knows that you're struggling, you're in a world of trouble. You're in a world of trouble. Because isolation promotes self-counsel. You know, there's a book in the Bible called Lamentations. I love this. I love that there's a book in the Bible that the title is basically, I'm pretty bummed out right now. Why? Because it's true. Because it happens. There isn't a book in the Bible called I'm hypocritically joyful. It's not in there. It's not in there. And so listen to this text. This is the prophet speaking. My soul is bereft of peace. I have forgotten what happiness is. So I say, my endurance has perished. So has my hope from the Lord. Who's the prophet talking to? Himself. Remember my affliction and my wanderings, the wormwood and the gall. My soul continually remembers it and is bowed down within me. The prophet is talking about his discouragement and depression to himself and saying, I can't get out of this. Why? Because you're talking to yourself. Part of the thing that keeps us in a cycle of depression and of struggle is that we feel like we shouldn't be struggling. We feel like we shouldn't be experiencing this. We feel like if we had better theology and better faith and memorized more verses, this wouldn't be happening. And because I shouldn't be, I experience shame. And the shame creates secrets, and the secrets creates isolation. And the isolation promotes self-counsel. And I'm talking to myself about how I feel over and over again, and neither God or anybody else intersects my rhetoric in a way that points me to Jesus. And so let me say this to you. It's not a sin to struggle. It's not a sin to struggle. It's not a sin to be sick. But please listen. Your illness is not your identity. Your illness is not your identity. We are living in a time where the things that people identify as, it's rampant, it's epidemic. And so let me say this to you. Your identity is not who you love. Your identity is not what gender you identify with. Your identity is not what you've done in the past. Your identity is not what you're saying to yourself. Your identity is Jesus Christ. Doesn't mean those things aren't realities. Doesn't mean those things aren't struggles. Doesn't mean those things aren't issues. But when they become the central identifying mark of who you are, if you do not combat that, it will destroy you. God created you in his image, and as you're in pursuit of living according to that image, you will experience forgiveness and freedom and joy. But when I say, I can't get there, so I'll take this, you are signing yourself up for your soul to be tormented. And so your illness is not your identity. You're not sinful for struggling. You're not sinful for having issues. Listen, everybody in this room has something that they struggle with. Everybody in this room has a sin that they have a hard time not doing. Listen to me, though, please. Your sin is not your identity to God. If you take your sin to God, what does God say? I put that on my son. I dealt with it on the cross. I cast it as far as the east is from the west. I have no idea what you're talking about. Your identity is Jesus. Your identity is the gospel, whether you feel it to be so or not. And so I want to talk to you about the reality of spiritual warfare. And I want to ring the bell on this issue. Listen to what Ephesians 6 and verse 12 says. We do not wrestle against flesh and blood. In other words, that person that you're mad at ain't your enemy. But against rulers, against authorities, against cosmic powers over this present darkness. Watch, the enemy wants to push you into the darkness. The gospel lets you come into the light. Against the spiritual forces of evil in heavenly places. I need you to understand, we don't like talking about Satan. We like to think that he doesn't exist. But the enemy does exist, and even if you don't think he exists, he knows you exist. And even if you don't want to think about how he attacks, he knows where to attack you. And if you don't want to think about your vulnerabilities, he knows what your vulnerabilities are, and he wants to push you into the darkness. He wants to steal and kill and destroy everything that God intends and says is true about you. For we walk in the flesh, 2 Corinthians 10, but we are not waging war according to the flesh. For the weapons of our warfare are not of the flesh, but have divine power to destroy strongholds. Our power is in the spiritual. Our victory is in the spiritual. Our war is in the spiritual. And you have an enemy who, even if you ignore him, he doesn't ignore you. One of my favorite stories in the Bible is of the prophet Elijah and his battle with the prophets of Baal. Elijah, the Bible says, was a bald-headed dude with a big old beard. And one of my favorite stories in the Bible is there was some young people who were making fun of Elijah for being bald-headed, and he had some bears come out and eat him. Come on, somebody. I'm just saying, it's in the Bible, okay? But one of the best stories about Elijah was this passionate guy. I can picture him spitting while he's preaching and always wiping his head off, his bald head off, right? And he calls the prophets of Baal to their place of worship, and he says, I'm tired of this. We're not going to do this anymore, and so we're going to have a contest, and you're going to call out to your God and gods, and I'm going to call out to my God, and whichever God responds, that's the one that we'll worship. I'll worship yours if he wins, but you got to worship mine if mine wins. This is a gutsy experiment, right? And so the prophets of Baal, they set up an altar, and they make it just right and just so and get it just precise, and they start to pray, and nothing happens. And Elijah says, maybe he's taking a nap. I don't know. Maybe you should talk a little bit louder. And so they do. They start to yell and scream and wail and all those kind of things. And Elijah says, maybe he's talking to someone. Maybe he's watching SportsCenter. I don't know, right? Maybe he's on a Netflix binge. I don't know. I don't know why he wouldn't be listening to you. And so they get higher and louder, and they start to cut themselves. They do everything that they know how to do to induce and compel their God to respond to their altar, and nothing happens. And so Elijah says, we're done. I'm going to do mine. And he goes over to his altar, and he has them douse his altar with water. He has them make it almost impossible for God to respond. And he basically says, God, whenever you're ready, and a fireball comes out of the sky and consumes everything connected to it. And Elijah turns to the altars, and he kills all the prophets of Baal. This incredible spiritual victory, this incredible spiritual success, this incredible spiritual high. I imagine that the gait with which Elijah walked back to his house was a little more swaggy after that, right? What? What'd you say? Yeah, okay, all right. But look at the next verse. 1 Kings 19, verses 2 through 4. Then Jezebel sent a messenger to Elijah, saying, may the gods do to me and more also if I do not make your life as the life of one of them by this time tomorrow. Then he was afraid. What? Swaggy Elijah was afraid? You just called a fireball out of the sky, man. This is one lady talking some trash, just sent you a Facebook message. What's the problem? That's what it said, right? Send a messenger, okay? He was afraid, and he arose, and he ran for his life, and he came to Beersheba, which belongs to Judah. And there, look at it, he left his servant. That was his mistake. And he went by himself a day's journey into the wilderness, and he came and he sat under a broom tree, and he asked that he might die, saying, it is enough now, O Lord, take away my life, for I am no better than my fathers. Watch, spiritual high, spiritual mountaintop, and what's right next to it? Spiritual valley. Why? Because spiritual warfare is a real thing. Can I tell you the time that I'm most vulnerable spiritually? Listen, it isn't Tuesday. It's this afternoon. It's this evening. Whenever I'm alone with my thoughts, I'm tired. Look, every service that we've had in the last 2 years, somebody has become a follower of Jesus. Every time. God's grace on this church. But I'll tell you, I go home and I'm feeling high, and then I get home and I'm alone with my thoughts, and I'm tired, and the adrenaline's pouring out of my body, and I like it to be a little bit quiet, and the enemy starts talking to me. Not on Tuesday after I read my Bible, after today when God's done something. Because spiritual warfare is a real thing. Tony Evans says every visible and physical is controlled by something invisible and spiritual. And so whenever the enemy, listen to me, John 10 wants to steal, kill, and destroy. I just want you to think about this. The enemy knows that if he can attack you in your soul, he can stop you in your spirit and your body. When something happens in our body, what do? Oh, I'm just sick. But our soul creates distance between us and God and puts a pause in our physical. So where, if you were the enemy, would you attack you? To steal and kill and destroy as much as is possible without being noticed, spoken about, or spoken against. It's not going to be in your body. It's not going to be when you're strong. It's going to be at times that you're coming down off the mountaintop. It's going to be at times where nobody knows. It's going to be at times that you feel ashamed. It's going to be at times when you want to isolate. It's going to be at times when you're prone to keep secrets. He's going to be at work in those places. Listen, I know you don't want to talk about Satan, but Satan's talking about you. And he's talking to you, and he's leading you, and he's trying to accomplish a vision that he has for your life. And if you ignore it, you're losing. You're losing. And so I want to ask you to remember what is simple. Listen, this is a complicated topic. It's impossible. This is one of those times the Bible says that there is a foolishness to preaching. This is a topic that I feel that more than any other, because the best way that I could help is to sit down individually with all of you, but I can't do that. So I'm speaking a macro word over it. It's complicated, it's difficult, it's painful, and so I just want to declare 3 truths over you. 3 truths from God's word that I hope that God's Spirit will apply to your heart. And the first is this: the devil is a liar. I hope that you don't forget that. The devil has a voice. The devil talks. The devil whispers. And whenever he's talking, he's lying. And so some of us, as we're going through depressive seasons or mental health issues, the enemy comes and he says, no one loves you. No one loves you. They act like they do. But if they really knew how you're feeling, they wouldn't, because you don't have any value. You're not bringing any blessing to them. You have no purpose. You don't have anything to add, not to your family, not to your work, not to your friends. Look, what do you have to have? You don't even want to get out of bed. What are you going to do? And if you did this, no one would miss you. In fact, they'd be better off without you. You're just holding them back because you're weak. If you were strong, you could do something about this. If you believe the Bible, you could do something about this. Why do you think people at church don't talk about it? Because they just want you to be stronger than you actually are. You're not good. You're not a good parent. You're not a good leader. You're not a good friend. You're not good at anything. And you never will be. You're a mess and you're weak. He is a murderer from the beginning. And he does not stand in the truth because there is no truth in him. When he lies, he speaks out of his own character, for he is a liar and the father of lies. You know, for those of you who you don't have a friend who's going to argue with him for you, can I tell you, you are loved. And you do have value and dignity and worth. And you do have a purpose and you do have a calling. And we wouldn't miss you if you weren't here. We do need you. You have the image of God, and you have spiritual gifts, and you have a ministry that we need. And we're sorry that you're struggling, but we're with you. You're not alone. And you are doing a good job. And we do see you. And we love you. Imperfectly for certain. The enemy's lying to you. He's telling you things that aren't true. And you're going to believe things and you're going to do things based on lies. And I'm asking you, even if you can't lay hold to the truth, just borrow mine, okay? If you can't lay hold on faith, just borrow mine. Look, we need you. And we love you. And we can't be what God wants us to be without you. And when you believe otherwise, you're believing a lie. Number 2, Jesus was a man of sorrows. This is so helpful to me. Listen to this verse, Isaiah 53 and verse 3. He was despised and rejected. He was a man of sorrows. He was acquainted with grief. And as one from whom men hid their faces, he was despised, and we esteemed him not. Jesus knew what it meant to be rejected, knew what it meant to be discouraged, knew what it meant to be depressed. Can you imagine you're Jesus, you go up on the mountaintop, you show your disciples your glory, and their big idea is to build some tents? Don't you think that Jesus spent a lot of his time going, really? Really? I'm completely alone in this. Don't you think that the times that Jesus goes off to be with the Father, he had some conversations about, how much longer I got to do this? I came into my own don't receive me, my family think I'm crazy. You made me pick a disciple who's going to betray me. I ain't even going to talk about Peter. Listen to Psalm 23. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I don't have to be afraid. Because not only are you with me, but you've walked this path before me. Listen, if you are struggling with depression and discouragement and fear and anxiety, you are on a path that Jesus has walked. There is no greater fellowship, this is what the Bible teaches, and it's a hard word, than the fellowship of suffering. Paul said in Philippians chapter 3, not only am I not alone, but I boast in suffering so that I might know Jesus better, so that his power might reside on me. In other words, God's highest power comes to those who acknowledge their deepest weakness. This is a hard truth because we just want God's power, but not our weakness. And then when people do experience weakness, we say, can you just fake it because it makes us uncomfortable? Can you just keep that to yourself? When in fact, if we would bring it into the light, what would happen is a more powerful Spirit of God, a more powerful work of God. Because when God says, if you'll acknowledge your weakness and live in transparency around it, you give me the space that I need to feel the difference between your very best and what's actually necessary. And so you say, I can't feel better. I can't do better. God's been there. God knows the path. God will meet you in it because Jesus was a man of sorrows. I love that the Bible doesn't say Jesus was always happy. Jesus was a celebrity. Everyone loved Jesus. Everything went great for Jesus. That wouldn't help me. Jesus knew what it meant to be rejected, to be afraid, to have sorrows, to be betrayed. Number 3, God's grace is sufficient. Listen, I hesitate to say this because it feels trite, because I hope it doesn't feel condescending, because I don't know the level of grace that you need, but I know the level of grace that he has. So 2 Corinthians 12, and we're almost done, says, a thorn was given to me in the flesh. You know what depression is? I think it's a thorn in the flesh. It's a messenger of Satan to harass me. And listen to what Paul says. 3 times I pleaded with the Lord about this, that it should leave me. Listen to people that I know and that I love who struggle with depression say, I've asked 1,000,000 times for God to take this away from me. And he won't. And I don't know why. And I'll tell you, I don't know why either, but I want you to see what he said to Paul. But he said to me, my grace is sufficient for you. And my power, listen, is made perfect in weakness. Therefore, Paul speaking, I will boast all the more gladly of my weakness so that the power of Christ might rest upon me. The Bible says that there is a grace that is received in weakness that is not received in abundance or strength. There's a grace that is received in foolishness that is not received in wisdom. That God, in fact, loves to take dependency and exhibit his power to the watching world through it. And for some of you, his plan is to take you through a season where he doesn't abandon you, where he doesn't forsake you, where he hasn't lost you, where he isn't listening, where he is wanting to show his power through your weakness. And so even though I don't have all of the best counsel, even though I don't know exactly the word to be helpful, I do know who does. And I'm asking you to just continue to put one step in front of the other. I'm asking you to continue to be courageous, to get up in a day that you don't want to be in and say, this is a day that God has made. I will choose to rejoice and be as glad as I can in it. And to acknowledge that even when my weakness feels greater than my day or my adequacy feels far too little, that God's power and that God's presence and that God's comfort and that God's proximity isn't to those who got it together. It's to those who know they need him most. And so I want to say that we love you, that we see you, that we want you, that we're proud of you, that you're not alone. And I'm asking you to lean not only into God, but into us. And let's walk through these things together. Amen?